Even the best laid plans sometimes go awry. Part of Taiwan's largest annual military drills are canceled as the country braces for Typhoon Gaemi.
东部地区受到台风的影响是比较明显，所以有一些海空的科目啊，我们也会配合整个台风的状况来去做一些调整。
Taipei grinds to a halt for 30 minutes as the public takes part in an air raid drill. A kindergarten in New Taipei is embroiled in the country's latest child abuse scandal. Plus, Heart and Soul. A performance troupe is taking traditional Taiwanese funeral rituals to Paris this summer. Hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. An incoming typhoon has forced Taiwan to cancel part of its largest military drills, the Han Kuang Exercises. This comes as the military was practicing moving its aircraft in the event of war, as Jaime Okan explains.
F-16 fighter jets scramble to take off, and a military cargo plane rushes to deliver equipment and personnel. It's all part of the 5-day Han Kuang Exercise, Taiwan's largest military drill, which simulates defending against an invasion from China. Taiwan's newly elected president, Lai Ching-te, oversaw the drill for the first time since taking office, inspecting troops on the ground. The military planned to land more planes throughout the day on Tuesday, but an incoming typhoon cut these drills short. Military officials say that although the weather looks fine to fly, higher altitude wind speeds and quickly changing weather are a growing concern.
我们在花莲所看到的可能只是本场的一个天气状况，但是它的战术位置，战机起飞以后的战术位置未必就是在花莲这个空域，所以它的情况会比较复杂。
Faced with the threat of invasion from China, which is more than 3 times the number of fighter jets, Taiwan's military has looked for ways to boost its defense and protect its limited military resources, investing not only in weapons, but also in infrastructure. The first 2 days of the Han Kuang exercises are all about survivability. That's why the military is practicing how to move aircraft from the west coast to the east coast to airports like this one in Hualien and into bunkers like that one over there, which can conceal aircraft and still keep them able to scramble quickly. Over the last 2 days, dozens of aircraft have repositioned to more sheltered bases in the east, away from where a potential frontline would be. Jiasan base in Hualien is critical to preserving these aircraft as it can house the most aircraft on the east coast and serves as a backup command center.
第二个是这个 command 的一个 reserve， 也就是在嘉山基地，它本身就是一个指挥中心。一旦台北的指挥中心就是 damage， 那可能就会花莲这里来replace 替代指挥。
Jiasan Air Base sits just behind Hualien Airport, and little is known about its operational capabilities. Satellite imagery shows only a runway connecting to the mountains, but inside lies an entire maze of aircraft hangars capable of holding hundreds of aircraft and months' worth of equipment. Taiwan has spent millions protecting bases like this one in the case of a war, but analysts say that investing in defense isn't just limited to weapon systems.
There's probably even more investments that can be made in ensuring infrastructure is defendable. So that's camouflage, that's hardening. These sorts of investments, I think, are just as important as the capabilities and systems that provide that credible air defense.
Officials here say that the goal of this drill and Han Kuang as a whole is testing the resilience of Taiwan's defense. And with the typhoon expected to hit Taiwan, the military will now have to figure out how to protect its aircraft from both the enemy and the elements. Ryan Wu and Jaime Okan in Hualien County for TaiwanPlus.
Residents in northern Taiwan have taken part in a mass air raid drill. The exercises aim to prepare people for a potential attack by China and come as Beijing ups its threat towards the country. Rick Lauert brings us this report from an air raid shelter in the capital.
running for cover as the alarm sounds. People in Taiwan's capital, Taipei, practice what to do in the event of an air raid on the city by neighbouring China. Beijing says Taiwan is part of its sovereign territory and has been increasingly threatening to take the democratic island nation by force.
我们确实希望落实全民防卫的意识，所以一再强调，物是敌之不来，事无有以待之，绝对要做好万全的准备，也再三的提醒同仁各局处一定是要料敌从宽，御敌从严，以这样的态度来面对各项灾害的发生。
These drills are part of Taiwan's annual nationwide war preparedness training known as the Han Kuang Exercises. This year, they are more in depth than ever as Taiwan bolsters its defences, boosting military spending and lengthening conscription to face up to the China threat. This underground classroom in an elementary school in the heart of the capital, Taipei, doubles as an air raid shelter. It's one of the thousands of places in the city where people are directed to gather in the event of an attack. And people will remain here until they're given the all-clear that it's safe to go outside. During the exercises, people are meant to be off the streets and sheltering for half an hour.
时间应该可以再稍微长一点，因为半个钟头好像在目前的这一种 情况下好像还不太够，应该1个钟头可以了。
反正就做好自己该做的就好了。我们平民就是保护好自己这样。
The air raid sirens here have brought usually bustling Taipei to a standstill. But for many people here, the disruption to everyday life is a sacrifice they are willing to make. They know it is everybody's duty to prepare for the worst. Joseph Wu, Yanhan Chen and Rick Glowert for TaiwanPlus.
As part of a week of exercises designed to prepare Taiwan in case of a war, local emergency services across the country are also being tested on their response to a potential attack. Tiffany Wong was in New Taipei City to watch the drills.
Local fire and police officials are scrambling to respond to an attack at these civil defense drills at the port of Taipei. It's part of the annual Min-An drills, which are designed to test the local response to natural disasters and attacks. This is the first time the civilian response drill has been held at the same time as the Han Kuang military exercises and the one-on air raid drills, really putting all of Taiwan's response systems to the test. And it's happening at a key seaport that could be the target of any Chinese invasion. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te was here to observe the drills.
演习非常完整，非常确实，也非常逼真。我们总共分3个阶段，24个科目，有陆海空的救援工作，所以可以想象，在天然灾害或者是暂时的灾害当中，可预期会发生的情况。
Over 2,000 people, 170 vehicles, and 3 helicopters are all participating in these exercises at the port of Taipei. Now, if Taiwan can hold key infrastructure such as these in the event of an invasion, it could prove useful to mounting a successful defense. By combining its military and civilian defense exercises, Taiwan is signaling its commitment to a whole-of-society approach to defense, one that observers in Washington and Beijing will be paying close attention to. Patrick Chen and Tiffany Wong at the port of Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has issued a land warning for Typhoon Gaemi as local authorities prepare for strong winds and heavy rains. The storm is expected to make landfall on the east coast in the early morning on Wednesday. The Central Weather Administration is warning of torrential rains, dangerous winds, and waves of up to 3 meters. Taiwan's Railways Corporation is increasing CCTV monitoring of the tracks in areas vulnerable to landslides. Fishing boats are being moved back to harbor for safe docking, while parks and hiking trails have been closed. 2,000 tourists have been evacuated back to Taiwan's main island from 2 of its offshore islands. Police in central Taiwan have arrested 8 people in connection with a drug ring, including the suspected head of the organization.
警方趁该集团前往民宿度假开趴的时候，持搜索票及拘票执行搜索，将余姓祖贤等8人查缉到案。
Taichung City Police also seized over 400 packets of drugs, including ketamine, and over $20,000 US. Officials say the ring operated on social media platforms and was connected to a recent assault case. 3 kindergarten teachers are facing punishment over the latest child abuse scandal to hit Taiwan in recent months. John Van Trieste reports.
你用2只手拉他双脚，他跌倒，他90公分的高度，他这样，他直接摔下去。那如果出什么事呢？你能承担吗？
Angry parents confront staff at their children's kindergarten over what they say is a pattern of abuse and humiliation. They suspect 8 children suffered physical violence or inappropriate treatment at this new Taipei school. Those stories of abuse go back to 2022, meaning there may be more. While only 3 parents are suing so far, several have traumatic testimony.
我的小朋友在午休的时间就是有尿湿裤子，有被老师就是当众就是叫其他的学生就是将他围一圈，把他的裤子以及内裤脱下来，然后露出他的生殖器。
午休时间他的餐碗没有收拾，那班导就走过来发现，那一气之下就挥手打我女儿的背，那造成说我女儿就往前扑倒，去撞到这个固定在那个墙边的桌子。
The breaking point came in April when parents at the kindergarten asking for a refund happened to see inappropriate discipline in action and blew the whistle. The school faces a fine of nearly $2,000 and more.
接获通报第一时间立即处理，同时解除幼儿园总公共资格，并勒令停招。
3 teachers accused of abuse face fines of up to $18,000, and 1 teacher has been barred from the profession for life. But while this case is being resolved, it's not an isolated one. Taiwan is still in shock over the case of a nanny accused of killing an infant in her care late last year. There were also accusations last week that a Taipei kindergarten teacher molested 20 students. The months in between have seen a string of less publicized cases across the country. And while some NGOs suggest better training for teachers, officials also face demands to increase school inspections to catch abuse early on. Justin Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Stick with us here on TaiwanPlus News because coming up after the break, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris secures crucial support to become the Democratic nominee. Stay tuned for more.
Taiwan Top 5 brand new season.
I like it.
I'm genius!
Oh my god.
Novel, interesting, and incredibly beautiful. Come on, come on, come on.
Super delicious, super minty, super fresh.
Whoa. Wow! Stay tuned. Do not miss it. Taiwan Top 5 coming up.
All new season. Taiwan Top 5. Every Tuesday, 8:15 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Donations and key endorsements are pouring in for U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign for the White House. That's after sitting President Joe Biden dropped out of the race, endorsing Harris instead to take on Donald Trump. Joyce Tseng has more.
Vice President Kamala Harris addresses the Democratic Party for the first time as a presidential hopeful, stepping in after incumbent President Joe Biden withdrew his bid for re-election amid pressure from party members disappointed in his debate performance and worried about his mental acuity and ailing health.
In the days and weeks ahead, I, together with you, will do everything in my power to unite our Democratic Party, to unite our nation, and to win this election.
Biden, who is still recovering from COVID at home, listened in by phone, vowing to campaign alongside the former California Attorney General.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
Campaign sources say Harris, the daughter of Indian and Jamaican immigrants, has enough support from Democratic delegates to win the party's nomination. In the first 24 hours since Biden dropped out, the vice president has raised $81 million for her campaign, the most ever in a single day for either party this cycle. And with key endorsements from top Democrats like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Harris is pulling further ahead of other potential contenders.
Everybody who might have been a formidable challenger to her has now endorsed her. Just over the last few hours this morning. So it's hard to see that there's anyone who would really contest it.
Meanwhile, in his first solo rally in Ohio, Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance slammed Harris and other Democrats, saying they, quote, lied about Biden's mental capacity to serve as president.
Every single person who saw Joe Biden knew that he wasn't capable of doing the job, and for 3 years they said nothing until he became political dead weight.
Vance's comments shed light on the Republican Party's shifting strategy, pinning the responsibility for what they see as Biden's failed policies equally on Harris's shoulders, on top of targeting her individual record. But Harris is pushing forward, contrasting her experience as a prosecutor with Donald Trump's as a convicted felon. But with the Republican nominee having a head start in the presidential race, Harris has her work cut out for her. She may have her party on side now, but she has less than 4 months to go to convince American voters that she's the right person to lead the country. Devin Tai and Joyce Zinn for TaiwanPlus.
Continuing on with news from the U.S., the head of the U.S. Secret Service has said her agency failed to properly protect former President Donald Trump from an assassination attempt.
The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts.
Kimberly Cheadle was reporting to Congress on the shooting. The shooter, identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, was killed after firing at Trump, injuring his right ear and killing a bystander. Cheadle says her agency had heard several reports of a man with a rifle on a rooftop before the shooting. Secret Service also labeled the rooftop where Crooks fired from as a vulnerable spot days before. Bipartisan lawmakers on the Oversight Committee have called for Cheadle to resign. She has resisted the call, saying she is the right person to lead the agency. 14 Palestinian groups have signed a declaration in Beijing to end nearly 2 decades of divisions, according to Chinese state media. Under the deal, major factions Hamas and Fatah agreed to form a unity government that would manage the affairs of Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. It's seen as a major diplomatic win for China, which brokered negotiations between the rival groups. The declaration may be part of Beijing's efforts to expand its influence in the Middle East. Hamas launched an attack on Israel from Gaza last October, triggering a war in the enclave that has killed nearly 39,000 people. Protests have subsided in Bangladesh after the country's Supreme Court scrapped the majority of quotas on government jobs. But the government's handling of the deadly unrest is now in the spotlight, with police accused of using excessive force and the country's leader facing calls to step down. Rosie Greninger has more.
A heavy military presence remains in Bangladeshi capital Dhaka after days of deadly protests. The streets are now largely calm, with the country's top court rolling back a controversial quota for government jobs. The quota, which reserved nearly 60% of the sought-after jobs for specific groups, sparked one of the deadliest outbreaks of violence seen in the country in recent years, leading the government to impose curfews and shut down the internet. But this calm could be short-lived, as protesters vowed to continue demonstrations if their remaining demands aren't met within 48 hours.
এখন আমরাও আমাদের এই আন্দোলনের ফলে যেই ক্ষয়ক্ষতিগুলো হয়েছে, যত শহীদ হয়েছে এই আন্দোলনে বা যারা আহত হয়েছে, সেই বিচারগুলো চাচ্ছি এবং যারা এর সাথে দায়িত্বে ছিল তাদের আমরা পদত্যাগ চাচ্ছি। কিন্তু সার্বিকভাবে আমরা এই মুহূর্তে যে ডিজিটাল একটা ক্র্যাকডাউন চলছে ইন্টারনেট বন্ধ করে, কত লাশ মারা গেছে সেটাও আমরা নিশ্চিত না আসলে।
They're also calling on the government to lift the curfew, reopen universities and release detained protest leaders. At least 163 people were killed, thousands injured and hundreds arrested when police cracked down on student-led protests demanding reforms to the civil service quotas. Protesters claim the quotas, which assign jobs to descendants of those who fought for Bangladeshi independence, minorities and other groups, were unfair, especially at a time of high inflation and unemployment. After days of unrest, the Supreme Court reduced the number of reserve jobs to 7%. But police are being accused of using excessive force, with one student claiming he was beaten and hospitalized.
তো তারা লোহার কিছু একটা দিয়ে হয়তো আমাকে আঘাত করতে থাকে এবং আঘাতের একটা পর্যায়ে আমি সেন্সলেস হয়ে যাই এবং বাকি পুরো সময়টাই আমার সেখানে সেন্স ছিল না।
Protesters want the government to take accountability for the violence, demanding the resignation of ministers and an apology from the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. But officials are defiant, blaming protesters and the opposition for the unrest. But the country's Prime Minister has, however, vowed to accept the Supreme Court's ruling and lift curfews when violence completely subsides.
আমরা চাই যত দ্রুত সম্ভব এই অবস্থা পরিবর্তন হবে। অনেকটা আমরা শান্ত করে নিয়ে আসতে পেরেছি, অনেকটা আমরা এটাকে মানে বলতে পারি যে অবস্থা ছিল তাতে আস্তে আস্তে এখন ভালো হবে।
But as tentative calm is restored in Bangladesh, the Prime Minister now faces accusations of human rights violations and authoritarianism. And with deadly force used against protesters, what began as a student movement against civil service allocations has escalated into an uprising against Prime Minister Hasina's leadership, with protesters now demanding her resignation. Dolphin Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
In Taiwan, soul guiding is a traditional ritual that's used to be performed in funerals. It's been dying out, but interest was revived after it featured in a popular musical last year. Now, one of the few remaining soul guiding troupes has been invited to perform at the Cultural Olympiad in Paris. TaiwanPlus reporter Yu-Sun Lai has more.
Unique music fills this courtyard in southern Taiwan. In the dim light, members of the Fengzhongden spirit guiding group, dressed in traditional costumes, rehearse for the upcoming Cultural Olympiad in Paris. Fengzhongden means lantern in the wind and symbolizes the warm guiding light that leads departed souls to the afterlife. The performance, known as soul guiding, is one of Taiwan's traditional funeral rites. It involves singing in Taiwanese Hokkien, dancing, and storytelling. This practice is believed to help lead the soul of the deceased through the underworld. It also serves as a form of grief counseling for the living. Accompanied by an electric sanxian, a modern twist to a traditional three-stringed instrument, the troupe is performing a piece that tells the story of people who leave their homelands to come and settle in Taiwan.
我就是尽量以原汁原味的卡蒙歌来做一个演出。甲阮即个伫松甲底排场的演出差不多，阮有一半50%-60%拢有摕来伫即件的演出。
Originating in southern Taiwan, funeral songs were once a common burial ritual, but have become rarer as ceremonies were simplified, and fewer families today hire soul guiding groups. Fengzhongden is one of the few remaining troupes preserving traditional movements and music. Many young people in Taiwan didn't know about this unique tradition until a musical featuring soul guiding songs became popular in 2023. It quickly went from a fading ritual to a nationwide sensation, landing this art form a spot in Taiwan's Cultural Olympiad lineup.
咱台湾这个土地有足侪族群，伫这几啊百年来族群的融合之下，伊有产生一寡伫这块台湾土地生长出来的歌谣，也是讲仪式。卡蒙歌就是咱台湾非常特殊的一种办丧事的仪式，伊就是代表咱台湾人的感情，对亲人过身去迄个感情表达的方式，就是安尼。
The rehearsal tonight attracted a small audience, including not only Taiwanese, but also a French priest. Living in Taiwan for more than 10 years, Father Jean Dussanterre believes this unique art transcends language and culture and deserves to be appreciated by foreign audiences.
Moi, je les invite à observer, à se laisser un petit peu étonner par une autre tradition religieuse que celle qui est la plus répandue en Europe et en France.
The members of Fengzhongden have been singing funeral songs for decades, but they never imagined they could take their performance all the way to Paris.
相信这几年咱台湾在国际上的地位甲知名度嘛，有伊一定的存在啦。所以讲，希望讲这个演出会当吸引这的外国人来了解咱台湾无同款的一面。
The art of soul guiding may be uniquely Taiwanese, but the emotions it conveys are universal. Like a lantern in the wind, the warmth of the performance touches the hearts of people around the world. Alex Chen, PT Zhuang, and Yuchen Live for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. You can visit the Taiwan Plus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out the highlights from a tightrope world championship, which saw Germany's Cecilia Stock winning 2 world titles. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.